Hey everyone, welcome to Tracer Burnout. I'm Roger.
And I'm Dan.
And we are happy to be here today.
Yep.
We're going to get it kicked off nice and early. We would like to recognize all of our new affiliates that we've picked up this year. So we have our friends at Orca Coolers.
Yep.
We have Fox River.
Yep.
We have Ariel Resupply Coffee, who was our first.
Yep.
Bear Creek Arsenal and Hero Soap Company.
Yep. And then, of course, we also have our partners at Heroes Harvest, old Mitch over there.
Yep.
And then Flags of the Fallen.
So two great nonprofit organizations. Yep. So we just wanted to give them recognition nice and early here. So
yes.
Perfect.
Sometimes we do forget. These old soldiers' memories aren't what they used to be.
What's your name again?
But while we're thanking people
and old soldiers,
I want to thank a former battalion commander of the 1st of the 325, also known as Dad. And he, while he was rummaging around in some of his old stuff,
he is a rummager.
He is. Found some of his old battalion coins. So there's one for you.
Oh, perfect.
And one for me.
He was a Red Falcon.
And I'll go
Never
ahead
mind.
I'll go ahead and put pictures of these in the video.
Yeah,
but then he also gave us one for the show as well. So
perfect.
Add that to the collection.
Yes, we are growing collection. So
yes.
If any of you have memorabilia, coins, anything cool, and you want to send it to us, we are, getting a collection. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to display it yet, but we are starting to accumulate cool stuff.
We are amassing stuff.
Amassing is a good word.
Yeah, we'll have to put some shelving or something up in here. I don't really know that it would all be on camera, but it would increase the ambiance. For the guest.
Yeah. Feng shui. I'm officially out of my depth now. Okay.
All right, but also, before we move on to the introductions, quick podcast update. We are in 29 countries, from the U.S. to Japan, from Gambia to Finland, Israel and Jordan and Egypt to the British Isles, and even exotic Canada, of course. Some of those places, obviously, everybody's already known.
Yeah. Who are our latest pickups?
Gambia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan.
Okay.
I'm forgetting someone.
We'll call that a win, though. That's good.
Yeah.
We are now in Africa. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, the Seychelles technically is.
Yes, Mr.
According to the map,
Mr.
anyway.
Technically, thank you.
The way that they break it down in the numbers and stuff.
Perfect.
But thank you to our listeners all across the earth who are enjoying these stories.
Well, we hope they're enjoying.
Well, they keep listening.
Fair enough.
And they keep on spreading the word, because every new episode that comes out, we add a new country or two.
Yeah.
Unless there's just one person with 100 or so devices that is traveling at a breakneck speed.
There has to be a more cost-effective way to get those downloads, but we appreciate your efforts.
Yes.
Y'all are our marketing team, so please spread the word, like and share our content. Mm-hmm. Just distribute it any way you see fit. Word of mouth is always great too.
Yeah, that's the best marketing tool.
But anything that feeds the algorithm in the digital space, we really appreciate it. So
we appreciate all you guys.
So okay, on to the episode. We would like to introduce to you Mr. Andrew Bragg. Stay tuned.
Enjoy.
Andrew, welcome to Tracer Burnout. How you doing this evening?
Good. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you taking the time. You were here in town. In a minute, we can talk about it a little more, but you were at the Airborne Special Operations Museum.
Yeah.
Taking part in a pretty cool event. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing Dan and I want to know.
All right.
Are you wearing pink Crocs?
No, I left them back home in Idaho.
Okay.
You still have them?
I still have them, yeah.
Okay.
Outstanding.
Oh.
All right. Well, we typically get started the same way. So does your family have a history of service?
I didn't know this when I went in, but we actually do. My family has actually been in every conflict that this country's been in, starting with the American Revolution, which is pretty cool. Like I said, I didn't know that going in, so it wasn't really a factor in my decision to join the military. But after getting out, getting the family history from grandma, it's like, oh wow, I had no idea, and it's pretty cool. contributing to that.
Do you know specifics? Like about like which family member served in which conflict, what they did?
No, I mean, not necessarily, no. I just know that we had someone in Vietnam, we had someone in Korea, we had someone World War II, like my great uncle, he died, he was a ranger in World War II, so he received a Purple Heart and then he died over there, so I don't know how far back that goes, but my grandmother kept records somewhere, and she it was all the way back to the American Revolution, and our family's name back then was Nation, which I thought was pretty sweet. But I can't tell you names, like Sergeant, whatever,
Okay.
and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
still, that's very cool.
yeah,
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to learn that. Yeah.
So talking before we started recording, you said you were from Central Ohio. So
Yeah.
what was that like, and how did a Central Ohio boy end up in the Army?
I mean, I was pretty much a normal Ohio kid. I lived out in kind of rural Ohio, so corn and soybeans, growing up.
Ohio.
Yeah, and I played lacrosse in high school, so all my friends would come out to the country, and we'd go do our shenanigans and play lacrosse out there. But what really drew me to the military, just like any other typical young lad, is all the movies out, like Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
You see all those stories about just men and fighting in conflicts, and I was drawn to that. And when 9/11 happened, that was kind of just like, yep, this is what I'm gonna do. I remember I was in 8th grade. I was in art class, and my art teacher turned on the television, and I watched the second plane hit the second tower, and already having played with the idea of joining the military, that day I was like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. And all throughout high school I kind of just prepped for that. I was in kind of like a not really quite an ROTC program in high school, but a similar class to that to prep me for the military. I was talking with a recruiter until I turned 18 and signed the dotted line. So
Why did you choose the Army?
well, I wanted to be a ranger, so I got a RIP contract. I was the 11 X-ray, and I went through RIP after airborne school. Didn't make it. I made it all the way through Coal Range. I made it all the way to the day of graduation where we were going to buy our tam berets, and they pulled 5 of us aside, and we were like, yeah, you guys didn't pass your history test. You're going to be recycled. And I was like, nah.
Rangers don't play around with the history stuff too. Yeah.
So I was like, nah. I'd spent a lot of time going through training through like basic, and then airborne school, and then waiting for your class in RIP. And I wanted to do the Army thing. I didn't want to just be in training.
You were ready to get out of the training.
Yeah. So I went worldwide, and I got orders to the 173rd in Italy. I was with the 1st of the 503rd, and went to Italy. And a month after I got to Italy, I was in Germany in their training cycle. And
Graf and Hohenfels?
Yep. And a month after that, we were in Afghanistan. So.
Had you ever, when you left to go to the 173rd, had you ever been out of the country before?
Oh no, man! I was 18 years old. Like, I barely left Ohio. I would go to Illinois to visit family members.
That's very
Florida,
exotic. Exotic locales like Illinois.
You hadn't even gone over into Canada?
No.
Wow.
I don't believe so. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, going to Italy, that was crazy. I didn't spend a lot of time in Italy because, like I said, I was there for a month, and then we were in Germany training, and then we were in Afghanistan for a 15-month deployment. And then we get back, and I was PCSing to go to Fort Bragg, so I didn't get a lot of time in Italy, and I was young, so I wasn't really gung ho about like, oh, let's go exploring Italy, which I wish I would have been, looking back.
Oh, of course, hindsight is always 20/20. Yeah.
But no, Hohenfeld was pretty cool. It snowed on us one time. So getting buried out there in Germany in the German snow, that was pretty fun while training.
I don't know if you're allowed to go to Grafenwehr or Hohenfels and not get snowed on.
Yeah.
Because I went a few times and it snowed on us every time.
I'm pretty sure it's just like a year-round thing. Even if you go in the summertime, you're going to get snow.
Is that snow?
It certainly feels that way. Sure.
But no, that was a pretty cool experience. But like during that deployment with the 173rd, that was our 15-month deployment. So we already knew it was going to be a long one.
So what year is it?
That would be 2007 to 2008.
Okay. So this is when the surge is going on in Iraq.
Yes.
So Afghanistan is now the economy of force.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were taken to Paktika province, which is on the eastern side of Afghanistan. It bordered the Afghan-Pakistan border. We were out of Fob Burmel, and during our time there, we were establishing COPs, kind of like that was the Restrepo era. Mm-hmm. So I was with the 1st of the 503rd, and Restrepo, that documentary was about, I believe it was a Bravo company of the 2nd of the 503rd?
Yeah, I don't recall. But
I don't remember. Yeah. But it was a different battalion.
Yeah.
The same time, and I mean, we had the same objectives: establishing combat outposts out in the mountains, basically to kind of intervene with any like free travel across the border. Disruption, yeah, and just give them something else to shoot at beside the FOBs, which
it certainly felt that way.
Yeah. We built our COP out in the mountains, and it was a pretty well established COP. We did a really good job building that up. Put a lot of man hours and sweat, blood, and tears into building that, and definitely in the long run, it was a good choice because the rocket attacks at Fob Burmel went drastically down. I remember in the Chow Hall, they kept like a tally on the wall of how many rockets Burmel received and stuff, and then actually the Chow Hall itself got hit by a rocket, which was pretty.
That's always a bummer.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. But after we put up Malakshey Cop, like that, I mean, it didn't go to zero, but it definitely gave them something else to shoot at, which was us out there. And
alone and unafraid.
Yeah. We received a lot of direct and a lot of indirect fire out there. I became very familiar with 120 and 60 millimeter mortar, even though I wasn't a Charlie.
Yep.
I learned that job because if you weren't in the tower, I wanted to be able to shoot back somehow. So.
What size element did you guys have out there?
We had a platoon size element manning that COP.
And you had 120s?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, it was funny because if I wasn't hanging rounds for the 120, I asked the mortar guys to show me how to, do a fire mission on the 60. So I'd be out there and they'd be letting me do the 60,
They'll let you do handheld?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was cool.
So for everybody that's listening, handheld is so mortars are a indirect fire system. They shoot very high, so they're very useful in the mountains because just if a target is, on the backside, we call it indefilate, on the backside of a high point, you can still reach out and touch them because it's going up so high.
Yeah.
When you're shooting in handheld, what you've done is you've taken out the metal base plate that the mortar tube sits on. So you're sacrificing distance, but in what you're getting in exchange is a much lighter weapon system that you can actually dismount and travel with. So
I mean, it's light is a very
operative term.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to carry the 60 millimeter mortar, especially the base plate for that thing. That would suck.
It does suck.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad I wasn't a Charlie.
I wasn't either. I still managed to carry that thing all across.
We carried the mortars, but I never volunteered to carry the base plate for that thing.
I don't think anybody volunteers.
But so at the COPs, we received mainly a lot of indirect fire at the COPs. They didn't really hit us directly at our outpost. They'd wait for us to patrol the surrounding areas to, directly ambush us. And, we had a lot of action out at Malakshey. I feel like we kind of messed up because we only had one road going out there. The engineers that developed the road and stuff, we couldn't, like with the terrain,
limited.
We couldn't really, there wasn't a lot of options to get out there. So we did hit a lot of IEDs en route and exfilling from the COP itself. There's a lot of blind spots. The COP was pretty far away from Faber-Mel. So even with eyes in the sky.
At this point, you guys didn't have the up armored vehicles were slowly making their way out.
Oh yeah, we were still rocking the
yeah.
Humvees.
Yeah.
Were those the 1114s or the 1151s?
I don't.
So the 1114s were the ones that had the armor added onto them, whereas the 1151s were the ones that were manufactured with the armor.
No, we had the ones that were manufactured.
Okay, yeah.
And that's it's kind of crazy. Like the IEDs we did hit were kind of small. I mean, it was good, but they blew off tires. They, you blew off the hood. We got pretty lucky. We did have an incident where there was a larger one, and it actually ended up killing the first sergeant of the Cav unit that was out there with us, and that's why they renamed Faber-Mel. I believe it's Fob Boris, because it was First Sergeant Boris that died in that IED incident.
You guys had slice elements with you?
At Bermel, yeah. Okay. So, but Malakshey Cop was a fun place. We fortified the crap out of that. We even put we took Humvee windshields and we placed them in the towers, so you had bulletproof glass to hide behind.
Yeah,
it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We were pretty good at building outposts at that time, but a lot of our direct fire contact came from patrolling in the area. We went on dismounted patrols quite a bit, but when we were mounted in the Humvees, I was always the lead truck gunner. My squad leader was always the lead truck TC, and he wanted me in the gun with him. So I was always on the 50 cal, and I love that gun. That's my favorite gun. Everybody listens to Ma.
Mm-hmm.
So that had a lot of experience in firefights with that 50 cal machine gun. And there's one day that sticks out to me where we were pushing over. We were cresting over a hill because our second truck in the convoy high centered, they got stuck somehow. So we were pushing over a hill to provide overwatch while the rest of the patrol unfire themselves. And once we crested the hill, our dismounts got out, and as soon as they heard the doors close, there was another enemy element on a mountainside adjacent to us, and they just opened up on just our truck. And I don't think they knew that I had the 50 cal, and I had a 300 round starter belt on that sucker because I jerry-rigged the Mark 19 ammo can to be my starter belt. Yeah.
Well done.
So that ammo can could hold 3 belts of 50 cal, so 300 rounds, and that was my starter belt, and I went cyclic through that, and I almost melted a barrel.
Oh,
I was going to ask about the barrel, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember the ammo count at the end of the day, but we definitely had to reconsolidate and reorganize with the other 50 cal truck in the convoy after that. But I was able to effectively engage the enemy, keep them suppressed until the rest of the platoon element could get to us, and the rest of the dismounts could get back to the truck.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. That was a cool day.
They were cleaning their man dresses while they were suppressed.
I was shooting them through trees.
Was that the first time that the enemy had experienced the 50 cal?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, we're talking Afghanistan here. I'm sure they knew. They knew. They've been shot at by Dishkas by the Russians in the 80s.
This is a generation later.
Yeah.
So
maybe,
I don't know. Or at least at you guys' hands. Was that the first time?
Probably from us. Yeah, I would say so. At least effectively. It's funny.
Not
these guys
to toot your own horn or anything.
Yeah.
Wow.
These guys were hiding behind trees, and I'm shooting through the trees are falling over, and then they're hiding behind them. They're their cover just immediately goes away. And
Afghanistan does not have an equivalent to the redwood forest.
No. Yeah,
those trees are small.
Yeah, I would say so. Eastern Afghanistan to me is very similar to. Probably the Colorado terrain, the mountains of the Colorado and the Rockies. And the trees are a little different, but the terrain is very similar.
Well, but you're not going to be hiding behind a tree from a 50 cal.
No, yeah.
There's no hiding from Ma.
No.
But we that was a day that really stood out for me with the 173rd, and there was also another operation we conducted. We were building again another COP, so it was a a joint operation between engineers and us infantry guys. So we provided the security. So we pushed out to adjacent mountaintops to try to keep the indirect away. And further we pushed out, and the hopes were that they would stop shooting at the engineers so that they can build the outpost. But during that time, like, we got mortared off of a mountain. And I don't know if you've ever experienced like mortars chasing you down a mountaintop as you're running away. But,
we call that bracketing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we call it.
But no, they weren't even bracketing us. They were following us.
Fair enough.
So
they were just chasing the azimuth. They were like,
yep.
Add 50.
But that was an interesting day. And then the engineers did end up getting hit, and it was I think it was a week-long project. And as we were pulling out from that joint operation, we had our whole company in this convoy. And again, there's like one way in and one way out. Mm-hmm. So a company-size element was exfilling in all of our vehicles, and they were waiting for us. They had set up an ambush line that was over 1 kilometer long. I don't know if ISR knew this or how we got this intel, but there was over 150 guys on this ambush line, and on the Icon radios they were picking up 6-7 different languages. So they knew we had to take this road out. Thank God we didn't run into an IED. But they definitely hit us with their RPGs. They disabled one of our vehicles. It caught fire. We had to exfil guys out of that and push through this kill zone that was over 1 kilometer long. Like the Michael Dietz like paintings or whatever.
Yeah.
He actually painted like a picture of like that event for that deployment. So that was a cool day. Again, I was a gunner, so I was gunning for the 240. I wish I was on my 50 that day, but I went through all the ammo in my truck.
do you have a copy of the Dietz?
I do, yeah.
Do you? Awesome.
Yeah, it's actually at my parents', but I have a photo if you're looking for if you want to see it.
Yeah, we'll put that up as an overlay.
Yeah.
That'll be
Okay,
good.
yeah.
So you're talking a lot about spending ammo, which is what we do, right?
Yeah.
How was the logistic support to where y'all were up there in the mountains? Was it easy to get stuff to you?
I believe so. I don't feel like we ever had a shortage of ammo. If you're talking about like food and stuff like that, yeah, we were eating mac and cheese every day, but I don't think there ever was a time where like we were like worried about like, oh man, like we need to, sustain to this and not go cyclic. And yeah, so
okay, that beats the alternative.
I don't know
right?
any of the details about the logistics behind that. It's just a Joe during that deployment. So
you just know you always had ammo, right?
Yeah, just knew that.
Snickers,
my
Snickers ice cream sandwiches.
Well, we didn't have much of that, but yeah.
Okay. But generally speaking, even though it was 15 months, this is your first tour.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that you guys effectively accomplished the mission you set out for?
I would think so. Yeah. It was interesting, the difference between my first and second deployment, and there's just so much contrast, like different area, different obviously different unit, different command, so it's like I can't really truly compare them because you're kind of comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah,
and it's not really fair. It's like a completely different fight from the mountains of Paktika province to the Kandahar Arghandab River Valley.
Yeah.
So. But I do feel like my first deployment, we were very fortunate. We had casualties, but we had no KIA.
Yeah.
No one died. We did have to medevac guys, and I say they were minor injuries. That's kind of, it's a perspective thing. And to them, obviously, they're not minor injuries. Right. But after dealing with like amputations and stuff like that, I considered like a shrapnel wound minor. But to those individuals, that's not a fair statement.
But I mean, your mission there was essentially to build cops. This is during your 15 months.
Yeah.
Your mission was to essentially build cops and be bullet sponges for the FOBs.
Yeah, and kind of patrol the Pakistan border, all the traffic coming in and out of Pakistan.
Act as a deterrent or interdiction.
It's a disrupt mission. Just slow them down, give them a hard time.
Would you say? I mean, other than the Chow Hall, indirect tracker.
Oh yeah,
were there any other sort of metrics that were used to show that, like, hey guys, I know it's been a long tour, but this is what we accomplished. This is what we set out to do, and this is what we accomplished. Was there anything like that?
We did have something like that at the end. Like we had like a count of all the 105 shells shot, the 107, is it 107s or the 155s and the 105s? Are those the big
That's
cannons?
the howitzers, yeah.
Yeah. So we had a count of all those from Faber-Mel during our time. We had obviously all the 120 and 60 rounds we went through. Like we had an ammo count of everything we expended during our time there, which was cool. We had a count of all the rockets we took. We had a count of all the mortar rounds we took, like all the IEDs we hit. So like you have this like, I mean I don't know them off the top of my head, but like we had like a list of evidence that we were in it, you know, and but like I don't know if that's like, does that answer your question?
Well, I mean, any fire you took was not then directed at the fob.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, mission accomplished, right?
Yeah. And I mean,
And they could eat in their chow hall in peace.
yeah,
Relatively.
that's true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 15 months and then back to Italy.
Yep.
But you didn't really get long to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, we got back to Italy, and then we immediately went on our block leave, our post-deployment block leave, which is it's different than like, you know, coming back to the States and going on block leave, because like you come back to the States, you feel like you're home, right? It's like, we're back in America, so you might not be home, but you're at least back, you know, home. So coming back to Italy was different. You were out of Afghanistan, but you weren't home. You're just like, all right, this is good. We're not in danger anymore, but you had to wait a little bit for block leave to commence, and then you can actually fly back to the States and go home. But we went on block leave, and that was like kind of crazy, because you had mentioned like that was the surge in Iraq, and that's like when that was what the media was covering. Mm-hmm. And I remember going home on like mid-tour leave and then going home on post-deployment leave after like fighting quite frequently, and people were like, asked you, because if you were in uniform during like your mid-tour leave flying home, they'd be like, oh, like were you in Iraq? And you're like, no, I was in Afghanistan. And they're like, oh, thank God. And it's like, what do you mean?
I had a similar experience when I came home on R&R leave from Afghanistan in 2005.
Yeah.
A dear friend of mine, he and I were in a bar in Lake Charlotte, and we were talking to it's a big finance town, right? So we were just drinking in a hotel bar, hanging out, and some finance guys were in there, and we just struck up a conversation with them. And these guys had 2005 now, so they thought I was in Iraq. So what I told them was like, no, I'm home on leave from Afghanistan, and this is in 05. These guys are like, really? We're still in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
That was in 05.
Yep.
It's like, I get it. People don't know, and they don't know what they don't know, and the media at the time was focused on Iraq, so it's like, yeah, makes sense, but it still sucks after you spend 15 months like day in and day out like in it, and then people are like, oh, thank God you weren't there. It's like, all right,
from a position of authority, of course.
Yeah. So that was cool. That was real cool. But then, you get back from post-deployment leave, and we went through like a EIB cycle, which I didn't get to partake in because I was PCSing to Fort Bragg.
So tell everybody about that real quick.
So EIB is your expert infantryman badge. You basically, have to prove yourself being the expert infantry, even though you had just spent a 15-month deployment, proving that you were expert at infantry.
Well, the EIB is harder to get than the CIB, right?
I guess. I don't know. I don't have one.
It depends on how you look at it.
Exactly.
I wasn't allowed to get mine because I had orders for Bragg, and I didn't have retainability in the unit. So they're like, oh, you're not going to be able to complete it, so we're not even going to let you try.
Oh, nice.
But because I was so good at the 50 cal, they did let me run the 50 cal station. My squad leader was running that, and he's like, he knew I knew it insides and outs. I could disassemble that gun better than the armor could. And so he let me run that.
Nice.
That lane, but I was not able to
test
and do that, which I was fine. Like I was like, all right, cool, whatever. I was kind of excited to go back to America, and I missed my Walmart. Vicenza, Italy is cool, but like it's a very small base, and if you're living in the barracks there, you're very crammed, and like it's. It's so I was like, man, I just cannot wait to get back to America where I can have my POV, you know, my vehicle, and I can go
big boy
I can
truck.
Go, you know, on the weekends I can go places.
Yeah.
Because like in Italy, you weren't allowed to leave posts by yourself, and you know, it being a single guy.
Oh wow, really?
It's like there was you had to travel obviously in LGOPs, little group, you know, groups. You couldn't go anywhere by yourself.
Wow. Like you guys couldn't even just like leave the base and go into town.
I mean, you could, but it is encouraged to go with, you know, a paddle buddy or something.
Right, but if you were going on like a mileage pass or, you know, taking a rail pass to, you know, somewhere else within the country, then you would have to go in pairs.
Yeah.
Or at least in pairs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I did have a chance. I went with one of my buddies. We went to Verona. That was pretty cool. That's like
Verona.
Yeah, it's where Romeo and Juliet story
Exactly.
was. Yeah, so we got to go see the statue of Juliet, and that was cool. It was a pretty town and everything. I never got a chance to go to Rome. That would have been cool to see a Colosseum and stuff like that.
It is very cool.
But
That's in Rome?
It is.
I believe so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was excited to get back to, you know, the States.
Where stores are open for 24 hours
Yeah.
and everyone speaks relatively the same language depending on their accent. Yes.
The
Yeah.
Italians spoke English, but they were always assholes to us. And
Yes.
I tried. You know, I'd ask them for a bus ticket in Italian, and they'd look at me like I got a grown out of my forehead, and I'm like, "Come on, man! You have a newspaper stand right outside of an American base. Don't tell me you don't speak English."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
I would also like to point out at this time that we've checked the block and made our one reference to Rome,
Oh yeah, that's
the
true.
Roman Empire, during
Yeah.
our
There we go.
podcast. So
Yeah.
men talk about it at least once a day.
Yeah.
I think about it all the time. But
Yeah. I think about it a lot.
At least once a day.
Yeah. Have you seen the new Gladiator movie?
I have not.
I don't know if I will.
I don't know if I will either.
I feel like that should have just been left as a one and done.
I agree.
Well, Russell Crowe wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how they roped Denzel into doing it. That must have been a huge paycheck. But I don't even think he could save it.
Dan and I both love Denzel.
Yeah.
But I don't know how he's going to salvage that thing. So
Really, no matter. So,
Denzel.
all told, because you got to Italy, and then like within a month, you were in Germany for your training cycle, and then deploying to Afghanistan for 15 months, coming back, and you already had orders for Bragg.
Yep.
Of the total cumulative time that you were stationed there, how much time did you actually spend in Italy?
In Italy? So I'd say about I want to say 9 months, I think.
Out of
The whole time.
Out of like a 3-year tour?
It was only 2.
Only 2?
Yeah. So, yeah, about 9 non-consecutive months. Because I think 2 of them were spent before the deployment. One of those months was spent in Germany, so I don't know if you can count that. And then, I want to say a 7-month period, because we got back in late July. So we'll just say August, September, October, November, December, and then January was when I was PCSing to Bragg.
So 7 months.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
That's pretty common from what I understand. I was never stationed there, but
I mean, people are like, "Oh yeah, I joined the army so I could travel." It's like, well, I got to travel to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Some people manage to stay there for years.
Yeah.
But
You can re-enlist with the herd, and you can stay there.
Oh, of course. But you were off to Bragg, and you're coming back stateside.
Yep.
So
how did you end up getting orders to Bragg? Did they just look at your name?
I wish. I got that a lot at being at Bragg. It's funny because they'd ask, "Oh, is there any relation?" And depending on who I was talking to, I'd either just brush it off like no, or if it was like a sergeant major that would ask me, I'd be like, yeah, there's a relation. I'll get the off my grass, and yeah. So, but I don't really know if there's actually a relation.
Well, I mean, it's not exactly the most uncommon name in the world.
Yeah, I kind of want to go around and take a street sign before they change them all to Liberty.
It's going to change back to Bragg here.
You think so?
Well,
my goal.
Trump promised it.
My goal is that if my book does well enough, hopefully they'll consider renaming Fort Liberty
There you
after
go.
myself,
There you go.
and then thus restoring the balance amongst the special operations and paratrooper community.
There you go.
We'll be back in harmony.
Course of action approved.
Well, I'm glad to see you've kept your aspirations manageable. But all right, so you got to Bragg,
Yep.
and when was that?
That-
January of.
Yeah, I got to Bragg on my birthday, January 30th of 2009. I would turn 21 on a plane going to Fort Bragg from Italy. So it was like a 14-hour flight. Yeah.
You report into Gavin Hall.
Oh, I don't remember a lot about like that process. I do remember getting there and they were, sorting us all out where we were going to go. And they had signed me to one of the guys that was supposed to take us to the company CP. And somehow I got mixed up and went with like some of the other guys that were in ACO. And they're like, they were looking for me like, where the fuck did Bragg go? And they finally found me and they're like, you're supposed to be at Charlie Company. So I went to Charlie Company and got assigned to 2nd Platoon. And that's all I really like. Charlie Company 2nd Platoon, it became my family. That was all I really knew out of the 2nd and the 508, was to Charlie.
You're a specialist at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So an E4. Yeah.
Yep. And it was kind of a weird position to be in because you're not a cherry, but you're not an NCO.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Joes were getting smoked in the barracks and you didn't know if you were supposed to be smoked with them, but then you saw who was smoking them and you're like, I have a combat patch.
But you got a patch on your right sleeve.
Absolutely. It's like, So I didn't know who to fall in with, if I fell in with the leadership there or if I was still considered a Joe. So I kind of segregated myself, and then I became the RTO for our platoon. So that kind of segregated me even a little more because you're technically part of weapons squad, but you don't really fall in except for information with them.
Yeah, you'll fall into formation and you'll do PT, but I mean, if the PL wants to pull you for his running buddy, then that's where you're going with.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that probably eliminated your chance of getting corporal stripes if you're the RTO. So.
Yeah. Corporal, that's a weird rank. I don't know if I'd want to be a corporal.
Yeah.
That's like you got all the responsibilities of an NCO, but you don't get to pay for it.
Yeah.
What it
it
is,
does sound good to me.
From my experience, it is, all right, you are a specialist promotable, and we need some guys to fill out the CQ roster. Staff duty roster. So before you go off to PLDC or WLC or whatever they're calling it now, we're going to make you a corporal and an NCO for 3 months before you go to school, so that we can slap you on this duty roster.
I'm getting a pay increase though, right?
No.
Right?
Absolutely not. You want to know a funny story? Is I got my stripes and I never went to WLC. I was stop lost during that 2nd deployment. And I got promoted the day we deployed, like the night we left for Afghanistan. My dad actually got to put my stripes on, which was pretty cool. But yeah, so I passed the board and everything, and I had obviously everything I required points-wise, from the 173rd's deployment. But so I got back, and because I was stop lost, immediately started ETSing. And they're like, you need to go to WLC. And I was like, nope. See ya.
Pass.
Yeah.
All right. Well, taking it back a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry.
So
Jumped
you
ahead.
said that you didn't really know how to fall in and everything. So
Yeah.
what was the integration process like then?
So once I became part of 2 Charlie, like I said, I was the RTO, and I just kind of was trying to figure out the new guys, right? Because they had been on a 15-month deployment the same time that I was with the 173rd. So trying to figure out kind of what was their experience with that one? Was it as crazy as what the 173rd experienced during that time? And then obviously meet the new guys, the Joes, because they were getting new guys constantly, and trying to learn my role as an RTO. I didn't have a lot of experience with the radios. Being a Joe with the 173rd, like I said, I was on the gun teams and stuff. So 240 Bravo, the M2 50 cal machine gun, that was my jam.
Mm-hmm.
The 117 Gulf and all that other stuff, not so much. So trying to learn that and be an effective RTO for our platoon was my main concern. But once things started shifting and we were getting ready for deployment, we went through JRTC down in Fort Polk, which I was the RTO for. And like, I'm gonna be honest, like I hated being the RTO. Like I'm not I don't like, I don't like being the comms guy. I like being a trigger guy. And,
some people love it because they have the personality type that wants to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You're
the focal point for
if you have that kind of personality type, that's the only thing for
100%.
you.
Yeah. But I like to be a door kicker and to get the trigger time. And like, as an RTO, that's not what you're there for. You're there to talk and communicate. And I understand the importance of that because, you shoot, move, communicate, kill. Communication is the most powerful weapon on the battlefield. But that's not what I wanted to do. So, but I had to be effective for my platoon. I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
So I did everything I could, but I was so glad when I finally did get to go to the board and I did get my promotion, because then they moved me back to a weapon squad and I became a gun team leader again. I deployed as a gun team leader. So, I didn't have to deploy as the RTO.
So when you got to Bragg,
Yep.
the unit had already received deployment orders.
Yeah,
they knew that they were going.
We were initially slated to go to Iraq. So throughout our ITC cycles and our JRTC and everything, we were training for Iraq. We were doing a lot of mount training, CQB stuff. But then I can't remember.
Once you're on the patch chart, you're going somewhere. They may change.
Yeah. I don't remember when we received the word that we were going to Afghanistan. But yeah, it did switch on us, and we kind of, it was weird. We were training for this fight, this completely different fight, and then we're just like, just kidding, you're going here.
So, of course, what they did, since there was a change of mission, obviously they sent you back down to JRTC after an appropriate period to refocus your training, and then they sent you down to requalify, right?
I mean...
Right?
Your Honor, he's asking the witness leading questions, Your Honor.
I mean, we were training to go to Iraq, and now when we found out we were going to Afghanistan, it's like, oh, thank God we're not going to Iraq, right? That was our thought process. That's what everyone told us. So, no, we did not retrain. We did not. Our sergeant major and our battalion commander were awesome at getting us all the training that we were required.
Yeah.
Those guys, like Genio and Puckett, man, those guys were badasses, and they made us a lethal force regardless of where we were going and what our mission was. So we were ready. I feel like none of us felt like, oh no, there's been a change of mission. What are we gonna do? No, it's like, as a paratrooper, that's our job, is to adapt and be able to, adapt to any fight. And I mean, we drop out of the sky to into enemy territory. So. Yeah, I feel like it was an easy change for us, and we didn't go through retraining and do all the stuff that you know.
When a unit is getting ready to deploy, they tend to plus up on personnel to fill any personnel shortfalls.
Yeah, overstrength too.
And yes, sometimes to the point of overstrength. Sometimes that comes from people like you who are coming from another unit and already have combat experience, but a lot of times it comes from brand new trainees straight out of basic.
The Joes, yeah.
And sometimes those guys can cause a bit of concern. Was there any trepidation going into your second tour, either from yourself or from your peers or anybody else that was like, man, we've got a lot of new guys who have no idea what's going on?
So the guys, I call them Joes, right? The privates, like the Joes we deployed with were the best guys I have ever fought beside. We went through a period as a company, as Charlie Company, getting rid of a lot of guys before we deployed. I've never seen this, because it never happened in the 173rd. But when we got to Charlie Company, there was a lot of guys being chaptered out, just for many different reasons. Before we were getting rid of the riffraff before we got over there, which was crazy. Mm-hmm. But of the guys,
especially during that time frame,
yeah, of the guys that remained though, like those are the best dudes I've ever fought with, and like there was not a doubt in my mind that like, oh, these guys are like these guys were young lads just like I was my first deployment, eager to get out there and get it, and wanted to pop their cherries, get their CIBs, and having fought the fight that I fought with the 173rd, I was like, I'm cool if we don't even shoot around. But I understood where they were coming from, because that was me just a year prior. So it was cool to see those guys, and they were such a good group of guys. Training with them through ITC and stuff like that, we all kind of clicked, and we all fell around. We got a new platoon sergeant, Sergeant Santos, and he became what we referred to as Dad. He really made 2nd Platoon who we were. And we were the redheaded stepchildren of the company.
There's always one.
Yeah. And we all just kind of like gravitated towards his leadership, and like he really led us and made us the force who we were. Like played to our strengths.
Oftentimes, the personality, the effectiveness, the morale of the troops, regardless of whether it's a fire team, a squad, a platoon, a company, it tends to stem from the leadership. Mm-hmm. So
he definitely played a pivotal role in establishing who we were as 2 Charlie. He was the man we all looked up to, and someone who we would follow into combat, and we did. And so that initially started, that bond started obviously in JRTC and Fort Polk, and then continued in ITC, and then as we deployed in Afghanistan. And that's when we first got there with the 82nd, we didn't really have an AO of our own.
Okay, well, hold on. Before we move on to there, how long was it from the time you arrived on your birthday at Bragg to deployment?
So I got there January 30th of 2009, and we deployed, I think our Advon deployed in August of 2009. So do the math, what is that? Like
7 months?
7 months.
Or 8.
It was really more than closer
months.
to 8, but
I think I deployed September 1st. The main body was September 1st. So, yeah.
Okay. All right.
This is a very arcane paratrooper question. There's an interesting rivalry between the 82nd and the 173rd. Did you ever experience any special love and attention from anybody in the leadership when you showed up with the 173rd patch?
No, because they had heard about what we had went through that 15-month deployment.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know if their 15-month deployment was the same. I heard they didn't get in a lot of contact that during their time there, and we did. So, they couldn't really ruffle their feathers at me. And I kind of kept that 173rd patch on my right sleeve because of that. I was like, hey, I know nothing beats 4 aces, but so I didn't get any negative treatment. Yeah. And we actually, the 173rd guys were kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking in my own bias, but we were kind of valued amongst the other guys. And they knew we had a hard fight that first 15-month deployment. So, no, we didn't get
fair enough.
They
let you off easy this time. You didn't have the 82nd sandwich, not at first anyway.
No.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Well, before we move on to the second deployment, let's go ahead and take a break.
Okay, sounds good. Yep.
All right, so you're heading off for your second tour in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
What's the time frame?
So Advon left August of 2009. The main body, I believe, was September 1st, 2009.
Did you guys have a known mission that you were going to accomplish?
So not really. Our battalion didn't even really have its own AO. We were scattered all throughout the southern Afghanistan, Kandahar province. Our platoon was attached to a Canadian force in Masamgar. It was a Canadian tank force, which was kind of cool. We got to hang out with the Canadians, eat their Haagen-Dazs ice cream at their chow hall, and really like live the good life at Mason Gar.
Drink their Labatt.
We would go out on patrols and be support for them. So QRF elements, we do our own patrolling. We had a couple of villages that we could hit pretty regularly and know if we wanted to get into a fight. So Chowgar and 310 Kill, those were like, oh, like, you guys want to go fight today? Cool. Go there. And we pretty regularly get enemy contact, which is really good because like it popped the cherries for the Joes. Showed them what it was like, to be in combat.
Do you know what the Canadian force, what their mission was?
I don't know.
You were just there to be support QRF for them.
Yeah. Okay. I do, man. So I don't know if you guys ever worked with like tanks or whatever, but those. So if you ever in a firefight and we called the Canadians for QRF, we'd be shooting at each other, and then all of a sudden you just hear this huge, like boom, and both sides would stop shooting because we never worked with tanks before, so we didn't even know what that was. We're just like, oh my god,
was that them or was that us?
Yeah, so
was that
them
like, or us?
And then you just wait.
They were thinking
both
the same
sides
thing.
would stop shooting and be like, what was that? And then you'd see this huge Canadian tank roll up, and we're like, oh, okay, cool, they're with us. And you just keep fighting. So that was really cool to have. But,
where was this at specifically?
So it's in
tanks are not really friendly to the Afghan environment, or rather the Afghanistan environment is not really tank friendly.
If we were in Paktika province, like my first deployment with the 173rd, that tanks would not be very effective because of the mountainous terrain. But this was Kandahar province, so this was southern Afghanistan. Not a lot of mountains, pretty flat.
Well, you could see them way over there.
Yeah, they existed, but nowhere near us. Yeah. And there were a couple ridge lines throughout the Kandahar province, but nothing like eastern Afghanistan. But so the tanks were quite effective. We were in Panjwai, which I believe is southwest part of like the Kandahar city area. I can point it out on a map, but like I said, we were at Fob Masamgar, either Fob or Cop. I don't remember what they classified it as. But like I said, they had all the good stuff. So they had the chow hall. They had Canadian women there.
Canadian women.
They had their own gym. It was great. So we would go out, get into a firefight, and come back and have Haagen-Dazs ice cream. The Canadian forces would trade us our MREs for. They had these Red Bulls that were like infused with nicotine. So the guys would like trade MREs.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. And it was crazy because like I don't even think we pulled force protection there because it wasn't technically our outpost.
Yeah, right.
So,
It wasn't your battle space.
The battle space owner was the Canadian.
I mean, besides like talk guard and monitoring the radios, like our Joes didn't even really have to pull tower guard, which was great for them. But yeah, we really had it made at Mason Gar. And I can't speak for the rest of the battalion because, like I said, we were everywhere. We had some guys down in Helmand. I think 3 Charlie was out in that area, and they were getting it down there as well. I can't speak directly because I don't know the details, but I know that they were getting in some major firefights down where they were before we moved into our battalion AO, because eventually we did receive our own AO, and we kind of moved everybody into the Arghandab River Valley. That happened. There was word of it happening kind of the November time frame, so we really weren't at Mason Gar for very long. We got there September, October, and then November, where there was talks of us getting our own AO and moving the battalion. So maybe like a 3-month period where we were living the dream, operating out of a Canadian outpost. Once it was solidified and we started the move into the Arghandab River Valley, which was like probably early December, that's kind of what we were doing. And it was we worked with the Afghan National Police Forces there, that was kind of like one of our objectives was to train them and what they were supposed to be doing, right? We would take them on patrols with us throughout the district, and the Afghan National Police in Panjwai that we worked with were solid dudes. Like, these guys were good. I miss those guys because it was a night and day difference from the guys we were working with in the Argon job.
Yeah.
But we can get to that later. But so our battalion got our own AO. I don't know the deets about like the higher ups and how that worked, and like what our battalion commander did to get that.
Yeah.
But I guess a drug deal was made or whatever, and we were tasked with taking over the Arghandab River Valley from the current unit that was there, who had sustained a lot of casualties. We relieved the second ID guys, but I don't know if it was the second ID guys throughout the whole valley, because I don't know who Bravo Company relieved, but I know for a fact for us it was the second ID guys.
These are Stryker?
Yep, they were Stryker guys. And at the time, all we had heard was like these guys were getting messed up, right? They had hit IEDs with their Strykers that like cracked their Strykers in half, and everyone inside would be dead. And so we were hearing horror stories about this place.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, like here we go. But before we moved into the valley, we had taken some casualties of our own. We lost 2 guys in Panjwai to an IED. This IED was meant for one of the Canadian tanks, and we hit it with our Humvee. So it literally blew the Humvee in half.
Yep.
And we lost 2 guys, the driver and the TC, and then the rest of the guys in the vehicle, the gunner, and the 2 back passengers. Excuse me. The 2 back passengers were medevaced as well. The gunner ended up not coming back to us, but the 2 back passengers actually did end up returning to us, which is crazy to me. Like, those guys are Billy badasses in my eyes.
Is it AT mines?
What's that?
AT mines?
That was a pressure plate. I don't know if it was an actual mine or if it was the jugs of the HME.
HME, okay. Yeah.
It left a big size crater, so I don't think it was just a mine.
Yeah.
And I don't think a mine could do that to a Humvee. Like, I don't know if you saw the photos in the book. That was like one of the first photos. Like, and I have more on the Facebook page, and on like social media and stuff like that. So if you guys need those for whatever, that like from my first deployment, like I said, we hit IEDs, but they just blew the hood off the Humvees.
Yeah.
And then this was the first IED that we really experienced. I mean, we had a couple that blew tires off, here and there, but this one literally ripped that Humvee in half.
Well, like you said, it was meant for a tank.
Yeah. And I've never seen anything like that. Just like looking into the crumbled metal at the back seats of the vehicle, realizing that the front half is just gone. Well, it's not gone, it's all over. And so that hit us pretty hard. The fight up until that point was pretty one-sided. We were invincible. We were like, we would go to Chowgar, we'd go to 310 Kill, and we would win. We'd call in the Kiowas, we'd fight them off and high five at the end of the day and eat ice cream. And that's what we experienced up to that point. And then once that day came, that's when like we kind of all realized like, oh shit, this is not one-sided. This is for real.
It's reality check.
Yeah, we can die too. And so
from the time you guys took the first casualties, how long was it before you were in the Arghandab?
So November 22nd was the day that we lost those 2 guys, and like I said, early December, early to late December. So a couple weeks, maybe a month. That's when we started moving in. So
when you guys took the casualties, because like you said, you felt invincible.
Yeah.
Before, But then when you first took the casualties, and you already know that you're going to a place that's a hotbed of activity,
Yeah.
and the unit you're replacing has been pretty messed up.
Yep.
Was there anything that changed in those couple of weeks as far as, the demeanor, the preparation?
I don't know if anything changed like as far as the preparation, but the demeanor of everything kind of changed. Like with like the Joes, right? They understood why we were harping on them about the things we were harping on them about. The leadership had to harp on them a little less because they took it seriously. Not that they didn't take it seriously before, but it really sunk in like, oh, okay, this is why we do this is why we do that, and so after that day, like, it really drew us closer to each other, and guys stepped up, did your PCCs, PCIs, and not that we didn't before, but like they really got done, and team leaders were really checking their guys, really looking out for each other, and like, yeah, it drew us closer as that family.
Yeah. Well, you were going to need it in
in
the coming months. So you guys head out there to replace Second ID.
Mm-hmm.
And when you guys got out there to the first location,
Yep.
what did you find?
What are you referring to?
When you guys took over the cop from the...
Oh, so you're talking about when we first got to Cop Tines?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So when we first got there was like a whole process of like infilling in, right? We initially drove all, like, because we had to pack everything from Mason Gar and take it all with us because we didn't know what we were going to have out there. So we were stripping that place of everything, ripping out like internet wire.
As one does.
If we could take the concrete barriers with us, we would have. But yeah, so we packed up connexes, we strapped stuff to the side of our Humvees, and we were moving into the valley. And
what you guys really did was a very, very thorough police call.
Exactly.
Always leave the area better than when you found it, right?
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a controlled substitution.
So when we get there to Cop Tines, it wasn't much of a cop. The striker guys basically were kind of living out of their strikers, and they had taken over like a old abandoned school building. But like the towers that they had at the time were pretty pathetic. There was like barely a sandbag wall. They had used a bed frame to throw a parachute over it as like a roof to shade yourself against the sun. And yeah, it was very bare bones is the way I like to put it. Didn't even have like a true living quarters because, like I said, I think they were living out of their strikers. They felt the most comfortable in their strikers because that's how they operate. But yeah, so we get there, and our left seat, right seat, like, we didn't go on a lot of patrols. I don't think. I only really talk about one in the book, but I mean, if we went on more, it wasn't that many more. And it was kind of a very quick left seat, right seat, because these guys were done. You could tell it. Like the way I described them in the book, it's like how the guys were, telling me during the interviews of like, what they remember and stuff. And it's like, the way that one of the guys put it that I kind of liked was like they had reached their expiration date. Mm-hmm. And
tracer burnout.
Yeah, very much so.
After going through the Arkandab ourselves, we reached our expiration date too. So there's kind of parallels between the way we looked to the guys that replaced us, and so it's a circle, circle of life, I guess. But once the left seat, right seat was kind of completed, they left and like didn't look back. And when we were doing the left seat, right seats, it was crazy because they were like climbing over walls, they were climbing trees, like they were like avoiding passes, doing everything they could to not go on the beaten path. And we're like, what the heck are these guys for real? This is pretty nuts. And it wasn't until like the fighting season when we figured out why.
Yeah.
Because there was a kind of a lull in the valley. Everything it was December, right? So it was wintertime, and in Afghanistan they're seasonal fighters, so they hibernate and they don't want to be out there in the cold. So
Well, some of those mountain passes get pretty difficult for outside forces to get through during the winter months. not that would ever happen.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, so it was kind of a blessing in disguise that of like when we got there, right? Because it wasn't during the fighting season. It was wintertime. It was December. So we got to learn the valley. There was still like this constant threat of like IEDs, which we did come across, historic ones that were left there, but they were pretty much for the most part inactive. Like there was remainers of ones that like if they forgot to unbury or whatever, collect for the next fighting season. But the valley itself was like the way I like to describe it is it was asleep. It was a slumbering beast. It looked like a Tim Burton film, because you have all these pomegranate orchards and these grape fields that are just leafless. So the tree branches just reached up into the sky and like kind of curled over and created this canopy of just naked branches, and everything was just very eerie. But nothing really happened for some time. So we're just like, do we believe all the stuff we heard about this place? Like, like we're not seeing it. Like we were expecting, Battle of the Bulge here. But
your interpreters, were they from the area?
So our interpreters, they were with us in Panjwai, and then they moved over to the Arghandab with us. I don't believe any.
So
of
they
them.
weren't locals.
Yeah,
then.
no.
Okay.
No, I don't believe any of them like were Arghandab.
Because they would have told you.
Yeah. And looking back, like throughout history, the literature wasn't available to us at the time, but like there are books out there about the Arghandab River Valley. Like the Russians fought in the same valley. There's a book out there called like Over the Mountain.
The Bear Went Over the Mountain.
Over the Mountain.
And then there's the other one on the other side of the mountain.
Yes,
So
that's the
this is
one.
second
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to, and that talks about the way that they engaged the Russians during the fight in the 80s, and
I believe the author is actually a Pakistani intelligence officer who's very good at tooting his own horn. Not that takes away from what he's actually talking about.
Our dear friends, the Pakistanis.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take away from the subject matter, but
Yeah.
he's very self-aggrandizing.
Well, regardless, they talked about the village of Babur. They talked about Jelawar, and like they talked about the way they fought the Russians, and we would soon find out that that's the exact same techniques that they would use against us.
Well, on the one hand, you were very fortunate that you came during the non-fighting season, because that gave you time to actually create a defendable perimeter, and actually do some improvement on what Second ID had left you.
Yeah, exactly.
So at least there was that, I guess.
Yeah, we spent our time when we weren't on patrol. We did like 3 patrols a day, presence patrols, and then 1 patrol at night. But if you weren't on patrol, you were filling HESCOs, you were filling sandbags. We do like the whole like line of passing the sandbags. Like, one people would fill the sandbag, and you pass it down the line, and you just pour it into the HESCO. We didn't have the backhoes to fill these
Bobcats
HESCOs.
and all that stuff. Yeah,
we had to do it by hand.
Yeah,
and
it's good training.
Yeah.
Builds character.
So we built up our outposts. We built 3 towers, actual legit towers, not plywood or like a bed frame tower. We built up HESCO towers, and we made Cop Times what it was. We built our living quarters where we were able to use the FOO money, which is money that you get to spend with the local economy, right, and help. You can hire contractors and buy things from the bazaar, but we used it to hire contractors to get us wood, and so we built our own living quarters, and we really built up Cop Times all while learning about the valley. And during that time, we were really engaging the locals to figure out kind of who was who, right? Kind of doing our own census, if you will, of the area. We wanted to know who was supposed to be there, and so that if we ever came across someone who was new, we can be like, hey, who are you? What are you up to? What are you doing here? So we did a lot of that, and our platoon, so 2 Charlie was out of Cop Times, and 1 and 3 Charlie were out of Cop Nolan, and then our headquarters element, and I think like a squad from either 1 or 3 Charlie was up in Terra Nova, working with the company element. So 2 Charlie was really kind of on our own, and our platoon alone had the biggest AO like in the battalion. I don't know the exact square kilometer or how many square kilometers our AO was, but like we'd be going like a 5-kilometer movement on foot, like a dismounted patrol to like the Schuins. And that doesn't sound bad, it's like maybe 2 miles, but 2 miles in the Arghandab River Valley where there's a wall every 3 feet that you have to climb over, like that's a long way. Yeah. So we had a lot of ground to cover, a lot of just things to learn, and that's what we spent kind of like the early days in the Arghandab doing.
It's like a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Almost, well, terrain familiarization, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, don't really want to get into it too much because I don't want to ruin the book for people.
Yeah.
But the rest of your time in the Arghandab was horrible.
Once it kicked off.
So thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah. Once fighting season started, it was terrible.
It got pretty bad. It's not to say that we didn't have good moments, but
a soldier in combat will find amusement wherever.
Yeah.
Little gallows humor to.
Yeah.
Yes. So, the broad strokes of the rest of your time in the Arghandab.
Mm-hmm.
Once fighting season started.
So yeah, once fighting season started, it didn't let up. There was a short crescendo it kind of built up. So initially, they were kind of trying to learn our tactics, right? So they start taking pop shots and seeing how we would react. So initially, the direct contact wasn't like bad. They'd take a couple shots at us, maybe open up with a PKM, and then they'd run away. They were always watching us, so they would figure out, okay, they're gonna try to do this, they're gonna try to flank, we're doing battle drill 1 Alpha, So that's when they would change their tactics. So they would start to try to bait us into IEDs. So they'd we'd receive pot shots and we'd try to maneuver on them, and then we'd receive pop shots from a different area and we maneuver. So like they kept trying to bait us into areas, and
complex ambushes.
Yeah.
Where there's
and
being canalized and secondary.
Yeah. And the enemy ran into a kind of a problem in the beginning as well, because initially their IEDs in the area were hitting a lot of the locals. There would be a lot of farmers that would come to us missing limbs and stuff.
Kids.
Yeah. Because they hit the IEDs. And it's interesting how the enemy solved that problem with how they developed their IEDs in the area. Like they stopped putting out the pressure plates, or the pressure plate, they would bury the main charge itself, like the jugs of homemade explosives, and they would wrap det cord around those, and then they would attach the pressure plate or the toe popper mine, and that would be just under the surface, so they can unbury that and unwrap the det cord, and then that bomb is ineffective.
It's totally inert.
Exactly. It's dormant. So they would wait for us to leave Cop Tines, and then they'd set in all their initiation devices on their bombs, and they would set in their ambushes on their bombs, and they'd wait, and that's when the civilian casualties started going down, and that's when the intensity of our fight started going up. And there was a time where it's like, okay, it's clear. Like, it's not just like the scouts, trying to figure us out anymore. Like, the fighters are in the valley now.
Yeah.
And that's when it escalated to like them not really, instead of them just kind of like baiting us, and not really on the defensive, but like just kind of like, I don't know the correct term for it, but like And they went on the offensive, basically. So they brought the fight to us quite a bit.
Well, it's like the early rounds in a boxing match when
Yeah.
they're trying to figure each other out and figure out weaknesses, and it's probing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for us, we took a lot of casualties to the point where at one point, for a couple of weeks, like we were running out of cop times with just 2.5 squads worth of guys, and having to do our own patrols, our own QRF, and our own force protection with 2.5 squads worth of guys. Like that was asking a lot. Guys were going out every single day.
Yeah.
And
That's a couple dozen guys, and
Yeah.
well, a little more. But.
well, it's like you're going out on patrol to either get blown up or shot at, or you're on the QRF to go help your buddy getting blown up or shot at, or you're one of like 3 guys in the towers left behind. So it's like I'm glad they didn't know that we had a skeleton crew back at Cop Times, because had they coordinated something where while we were all out on QRF, they attacked the cop,
they would have taken
real
it.
bad.
Yeah.
You mentioned before
Mhm.
that before you got to the Argandab, the ANP you worked with were great. And they were amazing.
Yep.
Well, you had ANP in the Argandab too.
Yeah. So those guys, man, so it's not to say that they weren't loyal to us, but they obviously had skin in the game elsewhere. They did some things that were very questionable. I didn't put them all in the book because I didn't really want to shine too much light on them, but there was definitely some instances where like we would catch the police chief with a radio and be like, "Hey, what is this?" And there were instances where they, as we were leaving the outpost, they had carrier pigeons, and when we would leave the outpost, they'd flip birds like training day, and this as a signal to the guys out there, like, "Hey, they're leaving," and they'd come up short on ammo and be like,
that
"Hey."
was a specific incident in the book that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, there was a time where it's like they asked us for more ammo, and it's like, well, you guys haven't really been to the range, like, or you haven't been in a fight with us, so where's this ammo going? So yeah, it's like we don't have any proof, but we have like a belief that they were supplying the fighters in the area with ammunition.
We spoke to actually Roger's father-in-law, who was a Vietnam veteran, and his first action in country had a somewhat similar circumstance where they found in the after action they found the brass and some equipment that belonged to friendly Vietnamese forces.
Yeah.
But it was in the wrong area for it to have been fired by their guys.
Yeah.
So it was obviously coming from the enemy.
Yeah. Well, these guys, like, some of them are all right, but, man, it's just really hard to fully trust those guys compared to the ones in Panjwai.
So, this was my experience in Paktia. This would have been years earlier, so I don't know if this would have been the same in regards to the ANP, that Afghan National Police. The Afghan National Police were, generally speaking, recruited and maintained locally, as opposed to the Afghan National Army, which was it's in the name, the National Army. Those guys were recruited, and they were usually spread around, so they weren't necessarily operating in their home areas. In fact, usually quite the opposite. So as far as the police were concerned, these were local bubbas. Sometimes that works in your favor, and other times these guys are as corrupt as the day is long, and it's Tony Soprano, and you're on their turf, and they're friends with all the dirtbags.
Well, you got to look at like the funding of the AMP as well.
Yeah.
They got all the hand-me-downs from the Army, and they don't get a lot of the funding that the Afghan National Army did. So of course it's going to be riddled with corruption.
Yeah.
And
they weren't often getting their salary. They weren't getting paid, and so they're going to get paid one way or the other, and that's working with Taliban or a Haqqani network or whomever.
I mean,
they're going to get paid.
The way I think about it is you look at it through their eyes. It's like, we're not going to be there forever. They know that. So it's like, are you really going to like help us as opposed to helping the guys who aren't going anywhere, and as soon as we leave, you're screwed? So I get it.
Well, and knowing what we know now, were they wrong?
But it's I can't remember what I was going to say.
We were talking about the ammo.
Afghan National Police. So like initially when we got to Cop Tines, like these guys wouldn't even wear their uniforms. So we'd have guys wearing man dresses coming up to Cop Tines with AKs, and we're like, we're about to shoot these guys out of the tower. Like, who the like? And we'd have to like wave the guys down, like, hey, no, he's a police officer. So that was like the first thing we had to fix was like, hey, dude, like wear your uniform or you're gonna get shot. So like it was like really like training children. Like you could give a 14-year-old in America an AK-47, they probably do better than some of these guys did, and.
Spray and pray.
Yeah, and they that's another thing. While we were in a firefight, you'd see them just death blossom their AKs over their heads, like, and we're like, dude, like, what are you doing? Aim. And they're like, aim? What do you mean? Like, aim at the enemy. And he's like, well, then we might hit them. And it's like, what do you mean you might? That's the objective. And like, I guess it was like they returned fire because they wanted to retain their honor, but they didn't want to kill the guys because it was people they knew, or it's like
so kind of a oversimplification of this dynamic you're talking about. And Dan and I, believe it or not, are not Muslim scholars, but there's also, you talk about the honor thing. A lot of these guys would do that because of the Allah, if Allah wills it, inshallah. And they don't want to be the one to take somebody else's life.
Yeah.
So if they do the spray and pray and you get hit by one of those rounds, well, then Allah willed it. A little bit of an oversimplification, but I'm not too far off the mark here.
No, that's pretty close.
Which can be maddening when you're on patrol with these guys.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense, right? They don't go through the same amount of training that we do, and we're trying to be an effective fighting force, and they're just... Yeah.
They're just trying to survive.
Exactly. So I guess if you look at it through that lens, yeah, that definitely makes sense. But at the time, you're just like, what? You don't want to hit them? Like, they want to hit you.
Yes, they do.
So yeah, definitely the AMP at Cop Times was an issue and continued to be an issue for us throughout most of that deployment.
Okay. So... How long were you at Times before you took your first casualty there?
So we got to Times in December, and we took our first KIA in March.
And then the last casualty that you took?
The last casualty was July 13th, which was very close to the day that we were ripping out of Cop Times.
And during that several month span of being in the Argonauts, how many casualties did you take total?
So we, with including the first two in Panjwai, we took 6 KIA and 14 wounded. So
wounded that did not return to did not return to the unit.
Some of them did. I can't remember. So I think about maybe like 4 of them did, but for the most part, yeah. So we'll say 6 KIA and 10 wounded that didn't. I'd have to think about that. I can count it on my fingers, but yeah.
But that is all out of your platoon.
Yeah.
And the platoon fighting force is around 30 to 36
yeah,
people.
Less than 40. I mean,
yeah, like I said, there was a time where we were operating with 2.5 squads of guys. It literally was, there's a squad going out, there's a squad on QRF, which if you were going on QRF every day, like, there was no doubt. There was a point in time where we couldn't make it past the second canal.
Yep.
You talk about that. That in the book.
So we would, there was a line in the sand that they drew, and we couldn't get by it. And like the second canal was the southern line, and then Babur was the eastern line. And we had like a whiteboard which would have our like 3-day schedule. And we would write all the like second squads going here, first squads going here, and as our team leaders, like we were the ones in charge of that board. And eventually, we just would jokingly just be like, first squad, go to second canal, second squad, you're going to Babur. It's like so.
It's a concession, right?
Yeah, and So, but like as the valley was getting intensifying, like. Not just with the fighters and stuff, like it was awakening, like kind of like vegetational wise too, because you got to like think about like the terrain. You're not just fighting the enemy; you're fighting the terrain in the Argonauts. So, it's full of grape fields and pomegranate orchards. So in the wintertime, yeah, it's you can see for hundreds of yards because there's no leaves. But once the leaves return to the valley, you couldn't see 50 feet in some areas. And yeah, so we equated it to like Vietnam because it was like a jungle, which you wouldn't think it in like a desert.
It's a river
climate,
valley,
like,
right?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like Afghanistan. You're like, oh, this is a desert conflict. It's like, no, this was like a jungle, and you're crossing canals, holding your rifle over your head, just like they did in like Vietnam, and but yeah, so with the awakening of the valley and the returning of the leaves, like the fighting got a lot closer because you couldn't see as far, so the enemy would wait, till they
you couldn't see them, and they really couldn't see you
Yeah.
either. So the nature of the combat is going to get much closer.
Yep.
So as you guys started taking casualties,
Mm-hmm.
and the replacements for those casualties were not exactly forthcoming,
Mm-hmm.
based on the book, you guys, and I don't know if this was something that you noticed at the time, but it seems like, yes, you lost some good people, but you also got in some really good people too. Was that something that you guys noticed at the time? Like, yes, we lost, this individual, this person in this leadership position, or we lost, this Joe, but man, we got some great guys to backfill. Because that's the way it seemed to me, is like, cause it's not always that way.
Yeah, no, we there, like I said, there was that period of time where we were running bones, and but once we did start to get reinforcements, and we got squad leaders to replace the guys that we lost, and we got new Joes, we got new cherries toward the end of that deployment. It was like kind of like you could take it took a weight off your shoulder, but you're still in it, right? So you couldn't completely let loose, but you're just like, I'm trying to think of like a way to like express that. Like it's like a like, okay, like we can have a day off now, or we're not always going.
You can take a breath.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And those guys, the guys that came to us, the leadership that came to us it's like they fit like a puzzle.
Yeah.
It's like we lost this piece, and it's like, well, here's another one, and it fits.
Yeah.
And that really came together the way that it did. It was like kind of like, I don't know, it was like the stars aligned. It was exactly what we needed in the moment.
I mean,
Yeah.
And
that is the way that it came across in the book. It's like, you guys definitely got a bunch of good people in.
Yeah.
And that is not always the case. Mm-hmm. But all right, again, don't want to touch too much on what's in the book.
Yeah,
we want people
I'm
to
trying to describe it without saying like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this guy was great.
So when you guys left the Argandab,
Mm-hmm.
how long before you headed home?
So you're talking about when we withdrew from Cop Times, or when we actually left
When
the
you
Army?
actually left
the valley. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So because we withdrew from Cop Times, but we went across the river to the OCCD where the battalion was, and we patrolled for like another month. But like I don't even cover that in the book because it was like nothing for us. We got in like one more like quote unquote firefight, and someone got bit by a dog. I don't know.
Well, those staff weenies have to earn their CID. Right?
But as for myself, because I was stop lost, I went with one of the, not the first group, not Avon group, but it was broken up. So we went to Kandahar. We flew into Kandahar, and I don't remember exactly how long it took us before we were flying out to Manis. And we were in Manis for a couple days. And I do remember being in Manis, like, that was like a crazy experience because like you had made it.
Yeah.
Right? You're just like, you didn't believe you were where you were.
I experienced the exact same feeling.
And you're just like, okay, like, is this real or am I dreaming?
Yeah.
Am I still asleep in the Dab and I'm going to wake up and be like, shit,
Same.
You got me.
Same.
But we, I have a very vivid memory, like, while we were in Manis, like, we got to, since our battalion took so many casualties and whatnot, like, we got, like, beer tickets or whatever, tokens, so that we could, drink at the Air Force's local bar or whatever the heck they had, their MWR bar.
We didn't get any of that.
Well, so somehow, guys, ended up getting more than 2 tokens. I don't know if the Air Force guys gave up theirs or what.
They pitied us.
Yeah, so guys really let loose that night, and like it was fun just to like watch guys just get hammered and like do karaoke. But it was crazy that like less than a week ago, we didn't even know if we'd have both our legs, and now you're here just happy to be alive and like
Yeah.
singing Guns N' Roses. Every rose has its thorns, or
Yeah.
you know, something stupid.
Yeah.
You know?
Because that's exactly the karaoke song you want to sing after you get out of combat.
Yeah.
It's that decompression it's important, and it is weird. Things get weird.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming.
And then coming back, like you fly into was it Fort Pope? Fort Pope. What's the Air Force base?
Pope
here?
Air Force Base.
Pope Air Force
Yeah.
Base.
Pope Army Airfield now.
So you fly into there and you get off the plane, and
Green Rat.
yeah, the first people that were there to greet us, and I have mixed emotions about this because it was so good to see these guys, but at the same time, to see them the way that we did, like was like, oh man, was all the guys that were wounded.
You're wounded. Yeah.
So all the guys missing limbs, all the guys, you know, they're lined up in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's mixed emotions because it's like, it's so good to see you. Because the last time I saw you, we were loading you onto a medevac bird.
We didn't know how it was going to go.
But then again, it's like, you're missing your legs, dude. And it's like, yeah, we got to see those guys.
It can be so much worse.
Yeah, we got to see those guys before we even got to see our families. So it was like I said, mixed emotions about that whole experience. But it was a very powerful moment.
Were there any of the Gold Star families at Green Rat?
I don't remember if there were.
Yeah. That would have been tough.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
For both parties, yeah.
I know that one of our Gold Star wives threw us a party afterwards, but that wasn't at Green Ramp. It was later on.
Yeah.
She had kept her husband's promise. He was going to throw us a Hawaiian theme.
That's in the book.
Yeah. So she made good on that promise for him, which it meant a lot to us. So, but that didn't happen at Green Ramp. I don't believe that she was there at Green Ramp. If she
that would
was,
be a big
I
ask.
apologize. Yeah.
That would be a big ask.
Yeah.
Of the unit to ask those families that soon anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was all still fresh. You
right.
know, and, but it's just, I don't know at what point I actually believed I made it out of the valley. You know, you get all the way back to Fort Bragg and you're like, all right, like this is real. All right, like got both my legs and good to go.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you had been stop lost.
Yeah.
Explain what that is, please.
So like you have a end date of your contract when your contract is up, right? But technically, when you enlist into the Army, you have like an 8-year commitment. Mm-hmm. So at any point, they can either be like, no, we're going to extend this enlistment, or they can call you back if it's within that 8 years. So just because I was still in the Army, they just, and I'm not going to leave halfway through a deployment. And it wasn't I was only in stop loss for like a couple of months. But like instead of just sending you back early, they just extend your enlistment so that you can finish up. So yeah, like as soon as I got back, we went on like the post deployment leave, and then I started like my ETS process. So yeah.
So you had no intention on sticking around?
Not after that one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean the first one,
understandable.
Yeah, the first one wasn't all daisies, but I mean I felt like I got out pretty unscathed. But that second one, it's like, man, I think if I do a third one, I don't know, like I don't know if I'd make it through that. So, yeah.
Was there ever a point before your second tour, where you thought about maybe making it,
a career
and going for 20? Was it something you had batted around at all?
No, I never really thought about making it a career. I always wanted to just do my duty and serve. I don't have an exact time period on how long that was going to be, but definitely that second deployment had a huge contribution to that decision. But yeah, I didn't really have a end date on how long I wanted to be in for. So I just, stuck around for my initial enlistment and then decided to ETS.
When did you get out?
I got out November of 2010. So we got back, I think, September 2010. That's when we returned from that deployment. And yeah.
So you ended up doing about 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What was, especially after you were out pretty quickly after that second
Yeah.
deployment?
That's a short fuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the readjustment to civilian life like?
So when I got out, I really didn't have like much of a plan. I was going to use the GI Bill. I had no idea what I was going to go for, but I had that, and it's money that you have, so might as well use it. But I got home, and like it kind of like that second deployment, like it's like when we all got back, we all just kind of scattered like roaches in the light. Guys, like a lot of us were stop loss, so we ETS'd. Some guys went to different, like they basically broke up all of 2 Charlie, which is it's a very common thing.
It's common, yeah.
Yeah,
Guys
like when you have experience, you want to spread it throughout your ranks.
Yeah.
So.
We call
A
it
lot
Army
of-
Force Generation.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
portion. Yeah.
But
A lot of guys get, drill orders, recruiting
Yeah.
orders, instructor orders, or
Some guys go to
guys
selection.
get promoted and
Yeah.
they take over a
Yeah.
platoon in a different battalion, different division, whatever. Yeah.
So, like, it just seemed like we all kind of went were like dust in the wind, and we scattered. And yeah, it's I don't feel like we all were running, but I felt like I could speak for my own self. I was kind of running away from everything and anything that would remind me of the Valley. So I got home, stuck around home for a couple of months, but it didn't feel right being around the family. So I went and visited a buddy in Colorado, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going out here. So I enrolled in school out in Colorado and tried to, forget the Valley. And no matter how, like, far I ran or, like, how much I tried, like, you realized that, like, every aspect of my life had, like, been affected, like, by the Valley, or like every decision I made, like, the Valley had some sort of input towards it. Like the color of my vehicle, like I bought like like the quicksand Tacoma because it like reminded me of the Humvee, or something stupid like that. Like there's always an aspect. It
permeates everything.
Yeah, there's always an aspect of that in my life, and so I went and I became an EMT after I got out. Because I was like, oh, well, if I can deal with triple amputations and gunshot wounds, like nothing's gonna faze me. And that was cool for a while. I had more experience than a lot of the EMTs out on the ambulances and stuff. I've done things in the field that paramedics, it was out of the scope of an EMT, but paramedics hadn't even done. So, just kind of sharing my experiences with those guys and stuff, that was really cool. But I really got kind of burnt out because I had imagined this like life of like, oh, I'm gonna be saving people from car accidents and pulling people out of wrecked vehicles and like saving people's lives from fires and stuff. And then in actuality, like 80% of the calls I would run would be like
Driving homeless people around. And
well, that and like the 400-pound diabetic who like rolled out of bed and he can't get up, and his neighbors hadn't seen him in 2 days, so they gave us a call to do a courtesy check, and we come in there and he's covered in his own fecal matter, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like I didn't want to deal with that, and so I decided, I was like, all right, I need to make a right turn or a left turn. It's not the path I want to be on.
The glories of life in service.
Yeah.
They call it the service for a reason.
Well, as you go from treating 20-something-year-old kids that are athletic, for a trauma injury versus like a medical injury, and it's like old people, fat people, and
Chronic.
Yeah, exactly.
Chronic illness. And
so it just wasn't the same. And yeah, you get that one motorcycle accident, or you get that one, like suicide, or like that's like, oh yeah, I remember this. But like it was like that's what I would do good at. But when it comes down to the actual like patient care of EMS, I was like, yeah, like I don't think that you would want me taking care of your loved one. So it's like, all right, like, yeah. So, yeah, I decided to change course, and I went to school and got my degree in mechanical engineering. I picked that just because it was hard.
It sounded hard.
Yeah. They're like, oh, this is really hard. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to do that. And
Challenge accepted.
yeah, I wanted to prove to people that I wasn't just some dumb grunt.
A grunt.
And, yeah, I did. It was the best thing is like when I'd work my ass off and study my ass off just so that like the smart kids, I could like beat them on the exam. They'd be like, oh, what'd you get? And I'd be like it's like, how does it feel to be beaten by a dumb grunt? You know?
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, no, I did well, and I graduated with my degree in mechanical engineering. I had a little bit of frustration with school. Have you guys gone to school? My experience, like, and this kind of, I liked your input on this, is like, so the way the military works is there is a standard, and you are a go or you are a no-go at the station. That is black and white. It's plain and simple. Versus like the college atmosphere, like, you know, I'd spend all this time studying, doing my homework, working on projects, and then, you know, when it finally comes to take the exam, like I get maybe a high B or a B. But because the class average was a 45%, the curve would bump me up to like an A.
The grading curve.
Yeah, to me it just made me so angry because I did not have, like, my grade did not reflect my understanding of the material. To the point where it's like it made me look better, you know. It's like, oh, like you're a scholar, and it's like, no, I honestly have a B's understanding of the material, but yeah.
Well, the grading curve is not to make you look better. It's to make other people on the other side of the curve look better.
Well, that's the problem.
And that is the problem.
Because so you started seeing a culture shift in school of like, oh, all I have to do is better than the class average and I'll be fine. So when the class average is a failing grade, like a 40% or lower, it's like, and these are like engineers, you know, we're talking mechanical engineers. Like, these are the people building or designing your planes you're flying in and your cars you're going to be driving, you know. It's like, to me that's scary. And but I did not have a good experience in college.
Just one more reason for me not to fly anywhere.
I mean, I don't know. Did you guys you understood what I was talking about, right? Like, yeah, it's just frustrating. You know, like, we have these standards, and you don't lower the standards just so that more people can succeed. And I don't know. Well, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
You are not crazy, but we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. We are not going to go any further down this rabbit hole than we've already stuck our head.
We'll do it over beers later.
Okay.
So
I went to. Yeah, go ahead.
So, at what point did you start getting an inkling of, you know?
An inkling. I see what you did there.
Maybe I should write the story of everything that we went through.
So after I got my degree, I bounced. I couldn't stick with the job. It's not that I wasn't like a good employee. I worked my ass off for everybody that I worked for, and like any one of them has said they'd be glad to have me back. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt like, I don't want to say worth it, but like it didn't feel fulfilling to me. I'd eventually just master my art and then be like, I'm kind of bored. I'm going to go do something else. So I went from like climbing cell phone towers to inspect cellular equipment to working for Amazon delivering packages to working for like Lockheed Martin Space to building log cabin homes to, you know, like I was just all over the place, and I just like couldn't figure out like what it was that I wanted to do. Something was missing, and you know, like the valley was always present, right? There wasn't a day that went by that I wouldn't think about like the guys at 2 Charlie or like everything we went through there, but you just didn't talk about it, mainly because people didn't want to hear about it. But I mean, I was pretty open with people if they wanted, but yeah. So it wasn't until so I was working building log cabin homes, and I got it in my head that I was like, oh, like I'm gonna live out of my truck because that's a good idea. I'm gonna save money,
As one does.
not paying rent, and live out of my truck. So I'd been doing that for about a year, and it wasn't bad. I had a nice place to take a shower in the shop of the warehouse of the log cabin company, and they let me stay on the property because I was like extra security for them at night. But yeah,
But were you saving money?
I actually was, yeah. I was.
Okay.
I didn't have rent. I didn't have bills. Like I was just food and gas.
Okay.
So and I was doing side jobs like installing windows and bucking doors and windows for the cabins that we would build. So I was kind of working two jobs and yeah. So I was saving money. And then November of 2022 came. And that's when the book Bravo Company came out. And it was written by, can I give him kudos? Like the guy? Okay. So Ben Kessling wrote the book, who was like a Wall Street Journal author. And I got it and like I'm not a big reader. But I read that book in like 3 days. It brought back all the sights. It brought back all the sounds, the smells of the valley because it was about Bravo Company during that second deployment. I was just like, holy shit, like this. Sorry, I was like, wow, like this is, I'd been thinking about this every single day, but it just really solidified it. Like, whoa, and I started thinking, I was like, we got to tell our story as to Charlie. And there was a lot of hesitation in the past about that. Because the wounds were still fresh with a lot of the guys. Because we'd been approached in the past from journalists, like, wanting to tell our story. There was an article in The Atlantic about us. There's been an article in the Reader's Digest about our platoon. But as for, like, a book or, like, a written, like, piece of work, a lot of the guys were kind of against that, and mainly because it wasn't from someone who knew us. It was just from reporters or journalists that were like wanting to tell our story and make their name with our story.
Yeah.
And but I was like, well, it's like, what if I do it? What if I like write this like our story? And I started thinking because this is right around the time where William Yeski had started his book, Damn the Valley. And I was like, because that was his response, like, they're like Bravo Company's guys.
Was the same response as an outsider wrote
they
him.
were.
Yeah, exactly.
If I remember correctly, they were not thrilled with the Bravo Company.
They were not.
Yeah. So it's not that I wasn't thrilled with that book because I didn't really know the Bravo Company's story. It was just like I wanted to tell ours. So I could have just sat there and been like, you know what, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna write my story and told it from a first person point of view and stuff like that. But I was like, man, I really want to see these guys. It was like 12 years, and I hadn't spoken to any of them. Like we Facebook stalk each other, but that's about it. I did speak regularly with one of the guys because we play Xbox together.
Whatever it takes, right?
Yeah, and that was like he's my good buddy, and he was one of the wounded over there. So like, but everybody else, I had no idea where they were in their lives, even though like I thought about them every single day. Sorry, I get a little emotional.
It's all right.
All right, man.
So I was like, I can't just tell my story. Like, if I'm gonna do this, like I gotta tell our story.
Yeah.
So I reached out. Everybody I was Facebook stalking, I created like a big group message, and I was like, hey guys, like the cat's kind of out of the bag now with the Bravo Company book. What do you think about me writing a book about us? And I explained to them, it's like, I'm gonna come to your guys' homes and I'm gonna interview you guys, and I'm gonna collect our stories, and I'm gonna write this book. And I didn't know how they would feel. Like I expected some, like just like last time to be like, absolutely not. But it was just the stars aligned again, and like everybody that I reached out to was like all about it. And I hadn't gotten a hold of everybody. Some guys just weren't reachable at the time, or it's like, but so like because if there was any guys that were like nope, then I wouldn't have done it. But everybody was like, yeah, let's do this. And I think it was because it was one of us. That was a big factor. And so I mean, it was an easy transition for me. I was already living out of the truck, so I was like, all right, I put in my 2 weeks for the log cabin company, and I took to the road, and I started narrowing down where these guys were. Dale Nullinger, who's one of the two Charlie guys, has been super helpful with that and just getting us all together. And he was tracking down guys for me while I'm on the road, and he's like, "Oh, this guy's in Texas too. You got to go see him." And
social media stalking.
Yeah, exactly. He'd get numbers for me, and I'd get in contact with these guys. But I made my way around the country from January 1st of 2023 till about April, and I conducted over 30 interviews with the guys that I could find, and just kind of asked them about one of the coolest things is I didn't know this at the time, but one of the KIAs, his brother, was actually he taught screenwriting in Los Angeles, California. So, and I hadn't met him. He was one of the only family members from that family that I hadn't met. So I spent some time. I was like, I gotta go see him. Like, I'm never coming to California again. So it's like, I better go see him. So I drove to LA, and I met him, and he gave me like a 15-minute here's how you write a script, or like here's how you write an outline for a script for a screenplay, and I was like. And like that 15-minute class he gave me was probably like a lifesaver, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was an engineer, not like an author, So,
well, at this point, I think you can, self-title as Renaissance man, because you've done quite a bit.
Autodidact.
But so I created an outline for the interviews, and then I started following and obviously that outline was organic. It changed and grew as I did more and more interviews. But I traveled the country, conducted over 30 interviews with these guys, and for me, I was going to write the book, but honestly, it was just all about seeing the guys again, seeing where they are with their lives, meeting their wives, meeting their kids, figuring out what they're doing for work, where they're living, how they're living, what kind of support systems they have, making sure they were okay. And it was like one of the most powerful times in my life, and I bounced around, and in April of 2023, our platoon sergeant's son was having a wedding, so we used that as an excuse to have a reunion, and we crashed his wedding. All the two Charlie guys.
As one does.
Yes, we were invited, but no. So we had a reunion in April of 2023, and 18 guys were able to make that, and it was. I could not tell you how awesome that was. And throughout the whole process of me traveling the country, we would have Zoom calls, and we'd get more and more guys on them, and we were able to help more and more guys. It's like we had all been struggling in silence on our own, and we finally pulled our head out of our asses. I don't know if that, you have to believe that.
Fourth point of contact.
Yes. But something turned the light on, and guys really have started the healing process in 2 Charlie. We've gotten guys via their VA disabilities. We've got guys enrolled in the VA. We had guys not even enrolled, so we've been working, not only getting guys the support they need, but being the support they need, and reconnecting. And so that reunion was the first time that most of us had seen each other in about 12 years. And it was awesome. And once that wedding was over, the honeymoon was over, and that's when I had to get to writing the book. So I would go to the local library, like the rest of my homeless brethren, and I wrote the book. And I spent 6 months every single day just the first chapter, I would go through all 30 interviews and just listen and take notes and just kind of outline out how I wanted to write it, what people, said, and,
Yeah.
put it together. And the way I wrote it, like I said, it's not my story. I'm a character in the book. It's our story. It's told in third person omniscient, point of view. You're like a fly on the wall. You get to get into the heads of certain guys in certain times. And I think that really kind of just puts you in the Two Charlie experience. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you did an amazing job with the book. Yeski's book is a little different in that he is, for the most part, the central character, and he tells about his experiences, and then there will be other times where it's a different person's story, and he just wrote the words down the
Yeah.
But the way you handled it, putting yourself in the book and still being able to tell the story as a whole, but keeping yourself as just a character, if you will, without the puffery that sometimes comes along with certain people writing books
Yeah.
with themselves in
I'm
it.
not trying to boost my own ego here.
Yes, that is. You did an amazing job.
Well, it's
you really did.
There are times where, I was there, but I'm not in the spotlight on this scene. Yeah. This scene's for this guy, and it's like trying to balance that with everybody. It was very difficult, but
you went around. You spent months going around and getting these interviews put together.
Yeah.
But you didn't get a hold of everybody.
Yeah.
Since you were finished writing the book, maybe even before it was released, but since you were done writing, have you had guys contact you, or you've gotten gotten in contact with more?
Yeah,
guys?
I've had a couple of them get in contact with me, and like I said, the work's never done. We're going to continue to reach out to guys, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get them all. But there are guys that don't want to be, they don't want to have anything to do with the Valley, and I get that. And some of those guys I did meet with, I didn't interview them. I just met them for breakfast, or I met them for lunch, or had coffee with them. But I still wanted to see them, right? Yeah. And then, like I said, there's guys I just didn't know where the heck they were, and we couldn't find at the time. Like they were AFK from Facebook, or I just couldn't find them. So I'm not gonna say I got every single one, but we're not done yet. We're still doing reunions. We're still doing our Zoom calls and stuff like that. So we're hoping to get them all on eventually. But yeah, I've been in contact with one of the guys, or two of the guys that were in the book that I couldn't contact them before, and they were like, oh yeah, this is cool, and some of them weren't. They're like, what? They were pretty upset. I'm like, I'm sorry, but yeah, like I said, we're not done. It's not like, okay, the book's out, see ya. We're continuing the reunions. We're like I said, this weekend was one here in Fort Bragg. We actually got to go see the current day Two Charlie guys out in the field.
Oh, nice.
Out there in ITC, which was crazy because
it's been a cold this week too.
Well, you got a bunch of old guys wandering through Area J, where the like, Chuck, hey, Chuck, where you at? And
have you found the keys to Area J?
No. But yeah, they're just waking up, they're freezing their asses off the last
cold.
week, and they're like, what the hell? Are these Op 4? What are we doing?
Who are these crusty old guys?
It's dueling banjos.
So yeah, I think it meant more to us than it did to them. Because I get it. You're an 18-year-old Joe. You don't care about unit history. You're just.
You will someday.
But when you become the history.
Yeah.
That's so. It meant a lot to us, and it was so cool to see those guys out there.
How did the Afghan pullout serve as a catalyst
for any of this?
Yes.
Not really. Not personally to myself. Maybe for some of the guys, but the way I look at that is, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, right? We were just kicking the can down the road. It was always going to happen. You kind of wish that it would have been a little bit more well, they would have held him off a little bit longer. Like they took the country back in like a week.
15 minutes, I think.
Yeah. But it's like, you spend all this money on your kid for private lessons to play t-ball, and you buy him all the sweet gear, and and then all of a sudden, he gets up to bat and he's like, I don't want to play anymore. It's like, what? No, you play to the death.
Oh, you're gonna play.
So
Okay.
But like for me personally, it's like, I mean, that was always going to happen, unless you look at like throughout history, like at World War One. We screwed Germany's economy and we didn't do anything for them, and then that's what like kind of made World War Two start, right? Is that retaliation? And what happened after World War Two? We're still in Germany. I trained there. We still have a base in Germany. We still have a base in Japan. If you really want to show your allies or like rebuild a country, it's not a quick and easy process.
Yeah.
So it's like World War II, that's like what, 80 years? Like we're still there 80 years later. We're not fighting, but so what did you think was going to happen in Afghanistan? You're trying to completely rebuild a country and establish a government, and you think that's going to just happen in 10 years?
And we call it the Long War.
Yeah.
Which is, misnamed.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, given everything that you've been through, good and bad, would you do it all again?
Has anyone ever answered no?
We've had a few caveats.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I do it all over again. I don't know who I'd be if it wasn't for like that time of my life. I mean, I have 173rd brethrens that I love, but I especially love my two Charlie boys. And like the guys that didn't come home have become so much a part of me and who I am. It's like I don't know who I would be without that part of my life. So I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Yeah. Those
who know, right?
Yeah.
One last question, because this is something that's been, I guess, percolating with me for a while. Really, actually, since about the time that we talked to Yeski, because I hadn't really thought about it. Completely fictitious scenario. The world is at peace.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing going wrong anywhere.
Gumdrops and lollipops.
Gumdrops and lollipops and unicorns and rainbows. Would you go back to Afghanistan? Just as in the sense that a lot of Vietnam veterans, decades later, went.
Well, you look at the generations
Vietnam.
of warfare, World War II veterans were able to go back to the beaches of Normandy, and go back to like Japan and like the Pacific, and you were talking about Vietnam veterans now being able to go back to Vietnam. Only time will tell if like that area of the world will allow that to happen, because it's a different
like
culture.
I said, gumdrops and rainbows.
But yeah, gumdrops and rainbows. Oh, I have fantasized about walking to the Second Canal intersection every day. I've looked at it on Google Earth. I pull it up and I just zoom in, and I'm just like, and it's changed. It has changed, but like, oh yeah, I'd go back. I'd walk the valley one more time. I'd be terrified. Even if you can like snap your fingers and all the IDs blow up, and I'm good to go.
If the grapevines were actually sugar plum candy and stuff like that.
Well, they kind of were. We ate so many grapes while we were over there.
Yeah. I do.
Pomegranates are amazing.
I 100% would go back, and that would be a very odd feeling though.
I have, like I said, I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I don't know.
It's kind of like I don't know, that's never going to happen, but you never say never, right? That's probably what the Vietnam vets thought, was like, we're never going to.
But it's a part of you.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, right?
Yeah. Do you think that in doing so, you would get a piece of yourself back? Do you think that would bring closure, or would that just, you just rip open the scab?
I have no idea.
So everybody's journey is going to be different. Mine has I've had to learn how to steer into the skid
Yeah.
because running from it and burying it is caustic for me.
It is,
yeah.
but that's kind of like how we've been trained, right?
Yes.
You move or die.
That's
You
our
always
that's our
take it.
ethos, right?
Yeah.
You stuff it down and you keep going.
Yeah. Take a knee, drink water, and drive on.
Change your socks.
Change your socks. I forgot that part.
Face out, pull security.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just I don't know. I personally would go back. A couple of the guys were joking and we'd be like, "Well, let's buy tickets right now." Like the Taliban is doing tourism. Like we don't have to know.
Taliban tourism.
My question to you. So I don't know if you guys had as intimate of a fight as we did in the valley, but would you sit down with fighters that you may have fought with and break bread with guys that you know were in your
As
quote-unquote
it
valleys?
stands right now, only one of us would walk out of the room. So
Yeah.
Let's say in the spirit of Christian brotherhood and faith, I would say I would hope that I would have the moral fortitude to do something like that.
I don't know.
I can
I'm broken
forgive.
between the two. Yeah, it's like-
I can forgive. I can't forget.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were...
And my forgiveness is, has as long a leash as, them being there and me being here is.
Yeah. The way I look at it is we were two sides of the same coin. And
I think that's true to a degree.
It's just like the scene in the movie where the villain says, we're not so different. We're not so different, you and I.
Yeah.
It's like, you're a murderous sociopath.
Well, did you have anything?
We can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This-
really
this
appreciate
has
you
been great.
guys.
We really do.
And like,
You did an amazing job with the book. You really did. And
I appreciate you guys actually reading the book because that means a lot for you guys to hear our story.
Or audiobook.
Yeah, or listening to it. It's available on Audible if you guys are wanting to know where to get it.
The reader did a great job.
Yeah, and but I mean, I poured my heart and soul into telling our story. I got like the thumbs
shows.
up from a lot of the two Charlie guys, and it's something that not only I'm proud of, but they're proud of too. And it's become so much more than a book, and it's kind of started like a whole kind of just revolution. I've been contacted by numerous other units that are just like, hey, like we're doing a reunion too, and we're thinking about doing something similar. And it's like, hell yeah, dude, like tell our stories, tell your stories.
Well, our generation needs to do it.
Yeah.
If we as veterans don't tell our stories, then who will?
Yeah.
There's a reason why the civilian populace has a skewed view of what the military is.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's the same people telling the same story, and those same people are only telling their side, and the 99.99% of service members' stories go unheard.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we're doing.
Which brings us to this round table today.
Yes, and it's part of what you've done, and I hope that all three of us can continue for a long time to come.
Heck yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you guys
So much. So, that was our third author.
Yes. Great to have him on. We set this up months ago, and Will Yeske, a previous guest, kind of brokered the whole thing. Yeah. So thank you to Will for setting this whole thing up. Mm-hmm. And then this will also lead to an additional, at least one more, maybe
down
more, down the line. If when you read his book, there's several of the other NCOs that are listed in there. Yeah. So looking forward to that. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Will.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of a companion book to Damn the Valley. So it's other side of the river, not too far away, very different experience.
Very different experiences.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think? Excuse me.
From his pre-military life, he said that his family has a history of service going back to the Revolution, and yet he didn't know until after he was in the army and he was talking to his grandma. Like, that's bizarre to me.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, service is something to be, proud of and cherished and everything. I mean, that's fine. You don't have to talk, you don't have to have, documented handwritten journals going back to,
Dearest mother.
Yeah. But still, that's something to be cherished. So, I mean, photos on the wall or
Yeah.
Something. Souvenirs
Yeah.
from time abroad. But he had no idea. That's just, I don't know. That's bizarre to me.
Well, he's making his own
That's very
legacy
true.
now.
Yeah,
So
he's certainly making up for it.
yeah,
He has added his name to that chapter.
yeah. So you and I have both been combat, on frontline guys in some of the worst places on earth, in Afghanistan, to name a few. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you think about just the prose and the narration of the book and kind of how it could relate to your own experience.
Well, I mean, I told him this, I think I said it during the interview. The way that he wrote the book, first of all, it's excellent. It's an excellent read. But the way that he was able to put himself in there as just sort of
A character,
not the character. There's a lot of authors that can't do that. There's a lot of authors that find a way to make it about themselves when it's not supposed to be about themselves, or I should say that their stated intent of the book is not to make it about themselves.
Yeah,
and yet they do it anyway. He did an amazing job with that. He really did. Almost to a self-deprecating way.
yeah,
Not completely. It's not like he was forcing himself out of the story, but he did a really good job with that. And he did like Yeski did, and a few points in there talking about how if it wasn't so deadly, it would be amazingly beautiful.
Mm-hmm. A thought I had several times. Yeah,
that is Afghanistan.
that is Afghanistan.
That is Afghanistan. There are some truly, truly beautiful places in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
it's too bad that when I was looking at them, everybody else was trying to kill me.
Yeah. Well, it's been run by warlords since
Time immemorial.
before Alexander.
I mean, yeah. But I'm glad that he made it home to share those stories.
Yeah.
He talked to us offline about questioning his own leadership and his own abilities, and I think that's natural when you lose soldiers in combat, to question whether you made the right choices, whether you made the right calls. I think that's natural. But maybe he was supposed to live so that he could tell the story.
Yeah.
And not just his story, but the story of all of those guys.
Yeah. Well, survivor guilt, a theme that keeps coming up in a lot of our episodes, right? And so it's very real. It's something everybody has to come to terms with who've been in those situations anyway. Maybe a alternative way of looking at that is not that I lost a guy and I'm a failure. Maybe another way of looking at it. It's a counterfactual, right? But maybe because of excellent leadership, you only lost one guy.
Yep.
Yeah. Great book. It's a great read. It's very gritty. It's very real. So just know what you're getting into.
It is not an autobiography.
No.
It is purely about his unit's tour in Afghanistan. That tour.
Yeah.
Almost specifically, but not entirely, about their time in the Arghandab Valley.
Yeah.
There's a little bit to the left and to the right of that, but it is...
No, that's the meat and potatoes, yeah.
The meat and potatoes is their time in the Arghandab.
Yeah.
It is a very good book.
Yeah.
And he was... I think he was the right man to write it.
Yeah. That's a story in and of itself, how he kind of came to the point where he decided he wanted to write it.
Yeah.
And then he lived out of his truck for months. Driving around the country. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, he has Dale, who we'll get to meet here, an interview here soon, I should say. We met him. We got to meet him today. It was almost like his tactical operations center. Like, hey, I'm going to get on the social media and track people down. You do the driving and the interviewing. I'll be the brains behind the operation.
Almost like his GPS.
Yeah. Very cool. So we'll be talking to Dale soon.
Do you think that he could write? Because he's had people reach out to him since the book was already written. Yeah. And some of the people that he couldn't get in contact with before or while he was writing the book, now he's in contact with them. Yeah. Do you think he should write not necessarily a sequel, but
that's second edition,
maybe an addendum?
Well, the thing to do is to write a second edition, and then in the foreword you spell all that out and say, hey, after first edition came out, we got in contact with these guys and we've made a couple.
Or maybe a sequel about writing the book and about how he went from place A to place B and he interviewed this person, but then he went to another guy and the guy didn't want to be any part of the book, but they sat down and they had breakfast or they had dinner or whatever. Anyway, maybe a story about the road trip collecting all this stuff.
I find it fascinating.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
So, Andrew Bragg, if you do end up writing that, I'll take partial credit.
Send the royalty checks to
just a thanks to
Tracer Burnout Studio, which we never did select the name for our studio. We got some pretty good feedback on that, and we left everybody hanging on that.
Well, we've been kind of busy.
That is true. Okay. Anything else on Andrew?
I liked that when he got out, he was moving from one challenge to the next, whether it was school or EMT or electrical engineering or building log cabins. He was moving from challenge to challenge until he got bored, and then he would move to something completely different. I found that very interesting, and I'd like to actually talk to him more about that.
Yeah.
Because living that way can make things difficult, but at the same time, you are mastering so many skills, and in a time and era when most people don't have
any skills,
for one person to accumulate so many is.
Yeah.
And obviously now adding author.
Podcast guest.
Yeah, podcast guest. Should we call him a journalist?
If you want to insult him, you could call him an influencer.
But
okay.
Yeah, it's I like to see that. Yeah. And I think it's interesting.
It's the first week of December, so Andrew was in town. He lives out of state. We're in North Carolina here, obviously. He was in town, downtown Fayetteville, at the Airborne Special Operations Museum, with several other members of his company. Not the whole company, of course, but a pretty good showing, though.
I think he said 8 or 9.
Yeah, I can't remember, but pretty significant, right? Yeah. So they were all down here doing a panel discussion, among other things. So we're very grateful that he made time for us this evening to swing by our humble studio and sit down with us. So again, many thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Free fire area.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Always.
It wouldn't matter if you weren't. What is the most overrated... I was going to say rock band. It doesn't have to be a rock band, but what is the most overrated band of all time?
Of any type of music? Or a specific genre? Because that's a lot to choose from, dude. I don't know. I've always thought that the Beatles were kind of overrated. Not, but their early stuff was good. I like their early stuff. The 90-second to 2-minute songs that everybody knows. And then they started
LSD.
Yeah, drugs are bad, kids.
Drugs are bad, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and then no. So but I mean that you could say the same thing about Metallica, right? The first half of their stuff was, I guess, at this point, it's probably the first third.
The first third.
Yeah. I mean, but then everything else after was like,
Everything after the Black Album.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Load and Reload had some good songs on there, but as far as like albums total, no, the Black Album was the last good total album, in my opinion. So I don't know.
Most overrated band or music ensemble.
Any boy band from the 90s. Oh no! Wait. New Kids on the Block came out in what, the late 80s?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm choking on my rage over here.
Any boy band is just... Ugh.
Okay. I'm not letting you off the hook with boy bands, which of course is true. Boy bands are awful, but I want to talk about actual music.
Okay. So
not the highly produced corporate crap. So
okay, fair. I have a feeling like you're trying to get me to say one specific band. Are you trying to? Is there one that you are like?
Well, I mean, there's
so
my opinion,
many.
and then there's the wrong opinion. So if that's what you mean,
just like a woman.
You're putting a tremendous amount of thought into this.
Well, I mean, I like a wide variety of music, and so it's really hard to pin it down. But most overrated. Oh, Nickelback.
Okay, that is a fair answer. Yes.
That's it. That's what I'm going with.
Look at this photograph.
Oh, stop it! I will rage quit right now.
And Dan was never heard from again. Okay, Nickelback is a perfectly acceptable answer for this question.
No.
Nickelback. Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I swear they were trying to bring back the rock ballad. That's what their music always made me think of.
Well, you know what the funniest thing about that whole thing? Nickelback was on Roadrunner Records, which is a hard heavy metal record label. I mean, Slipknot, Sepultura, Soulfly, Spineshank, to name a few, like hard stuff. And Nickelback was on that record label, which I imagine was probably the cash cow for the record label, right? So it's all you headbangers get to enjoy this music because of Nickelback, a band you all hate so much, but that's what keeps the lights on around here. So enjoy.
I have not thought about Soulfly in probably a decade.
Just let your soul fly free. So Nickelback, that's an excellent answer.
Yeah.
Mine answer is going to irritate all the boomers, but the correct answer to this question is the Beatles. So, with an honorable mention to Bruce Springsteen, who I will never call the boss, not even ironically.
I half expected you to say the Rolling Stones.
I mean,
just because I already said the Beatles, I expected you to say the Rolling Stones.
The Stones are overrated, but they're not the most overrated.
Aerosmith. Or they're another tale of like two halves, right?
I guess when you're around for 70
Yeah.
years or whatever the running number is now. How old? Well, we're doing this in reverse. I mean, how old is Paul McCartney now?
Oh, he's got to be an octogenarian.
In his mid 80s, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Didn't he just have another baby with his like 16th wife, who's also 50 years younger than him? I don't know.
Wasn't him and Linda's divorce? Wasn't that ruled to be the most expensive divorce in human history?
Was it?
I think so. Oh well, I don't know. Maybe the Jeff Bezos one is now. Maybe that surpassed him. But
I don't know. I don't care about these people.
And Bruce Springsteen. Yes, boomers, we're looking at you.
I don't care about.
We have you to thank.
I can appreciate the art and totally not be fond of the artist at all.
Yeah.
Or in this case, groups of artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this podcast we did today. Thank you again, Andrew, Will, for everybody else that kind of helped make this happen. Please check us out on all the social media. We're on all of them except TikTok. Mm-hmm. Please give us a like, share, subscribe. Please rate the podcast on if you listen. Please give us a 5-star rating there. Give us a review if you've got the time. That really helps. Yep. We appreciate it. And take us out here, Dan.
Go get these books.
Yeah.
Go get these books. Support these veterans in their work and what they're doing. They put their heart and soul into this. They're not professional authors. They are just veterans trying to tell their story.
And it is hard to talk about this stuff.
It is. So get it on get the audio version like Roger did, or get a hard copy version like I did. Whatever you can do to help these veterans.
Perfect.
And remember, your service matters.